Have you ever wondered how far someone would go for revenge? A homeless woman, an arrogant millionaire, and a plan no one saw coming. What began as a simple game of appearances at a wedding transformed into a shocking revelation of betrayal, power, and justice. This story challenges everything you believe about second chances and people's true worth. Society judges by appearances, but true intentions always come to light. Who would imagine that a woman found on the street would forever change the fate of an empire? Comment below where you're watching this video from, and if you want to discover this incredible twist of fate, subscribe now and hit like for more. Stories that will leave you breathless. The ending will surprise you. James Smith stared at the gilded invitation on his desk. Emily Blackwell and Jonathan Price cordially invite you. He scoffed. 3 years ago, Emily had been his fiancée, until she decided Jonathan offered something James couldn't. At 35, James had everything money could buy. A penthouse overlooking Central Park, vintage cars, private jets, and a billion-dollar technology empire built from his father's modest business. Everything except someone to share it with. "Will you be RSVPing, Mr. Smith?" Caroline, his executive assistant, appeared in the doorway. "Yes," James replied instantly. "For 2. Caroline's eyebrow arched. "2, sir?" "Yes, 2, he repeated, though he had no idea who the second person would be. In their social circle, success wasn't measured solely by wealth but by who stood beside you. The thought of attending Emily's wedding alone was unbearable. That evening, walking through the financial district, James noticed a woman on a bench who didn't fit the typical homeless profile. Something in her posture suggested dignity despite her circumstances. Her mismatched clothes were clean, her dark hair pulled back neatly, revealing sharp cheekbones and alert eyes as she read a dog-eared paperback. On impulse, James approached her. "Excuse me," he said, watching her look up from her book, Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment. Her eyes assessed him coolly. "Whatever you're selling, I'm not buying," she replied, her voice surprisingly articulate. "I'm not selling anything, I'm offering a proposition." "Let me guess," she said with cutting sarcasm. "A social experiment? Or one of those charity videos where the wealthy person helps the poor homeless woman?" "Nothing like that. I need a date for a wedding." A genuine laugh escaped her. "Well, that's new. You're serious?" "Completely. $5,000 to attend a wedding with me next weekend. All expenses covered. And why would someone like you need to pay for a date?" "It's my ex-fiancé's wedding," understanding dawned. "Ah, you don't want to look pathetic going alone." She tilted her head. "What's the catch?" "No catch. You look the part, act the part, we part ways." She tapped her book cover. 10,000. Half now, half after." James laughed. "You're in no position to negotiate." "Yet here I am negotiating." She smiled, revealing perfect teeth. "You approached me because you're desperate, and desperation comes with a premium." Her confidence intrigued him. "Fine, 10,000. Your name?" "Sarah," she replied, extending her hand as if they were meeting in a boardroom. "Just Sarah for now." "James Smith. I know who you are. Your face appears on business magazines often enough." She stood, tucking her book away. "Where do we begin this charade?" "Now," he said, gesturing toward his waiting car. Inside, the vehicle. James studied Sarah. Her speech, bearing, and reading choice didn't align with her circumstances. She caught his gaze and offered an enigmatic smile. "To the penthouse, Marcus," James instructed, then turned to Sarah. "Your transformation begins tonight." "Transformation," she echoed. "Interesting word. It implies I'm one thing and need to become another." "Don't we all wear masks according to the occasion?" Sarah's gaze sharpened. "Some more than others, Mr. Smith. Some more than others." In James's penthouse, Sarah moved deliberately through the space, fingertips brushing surfaces, marble countertops, leather armchairs, the grand piano James kept for show. "You have more space than you need," she observed matter-of-factly. James shrugged, loosening his tie. "Need has little to do with how most people live." "True enough." She approached the windows overlooking the glittering city. "It's beautiful up here, removed from everything. Easy to forget what the world is really like." Her tone carried no envy, but a detached observation that made James uncomfortable. He poured himself a scotch. "Drink?" "Water, please." Their fingers brushed as he handed her the glass. "Let's discuss our arrangement," Sarah said, settling. On a couch. "It's my ex-fiancé's wedding next Saturday at the Blackwell estate in the Hamptons. We'll need Friday through Sunday." "And my role? Arm candy? Conversation piece? Jealousy inducer?" "All of the above," James admitted. "You'll need to appear like you belong in that world." Sarah smiled. "I'm a quick study, Mr. Smith." "James," he corrected. "If we're dating, use my first name." "James," she repeated, making it sound like an assessment. "What's my backstory?" He hadn't thought ahead. "We met at a charity function. You work for a non-profit focused on urban development." Amusement flickered across her face. "How appropriate. And how long have we been together?" 3 months. Serious enough, but not so long people would have expected to meet you." Sarah nodded. "What else should I know about you? Beyond the press coverage?" The question caught him off guard. Most women he dated were content with his wealth and status. "Such as?" "Family. What makes you laugh? What keeps you up at night? Things a girlfriend would know." James shifted uncomfortably. "My parents died in a car accident when I was 23. I took over the business then. My sister Claire lives in Europe." He paused, aware of how mechanical he sounded. "I laugh at British comedy. Work keeps me up at night." "Or weddings of ex-fiancés," Sarah added softly. He ignored that. "What about you?" "I grew up in Connecticut. Studied English literature. At Vassar but left before graduating due to family circumstances. I've worked various jobs since." Her delivery was smooth, emotionless. "Is any of that true?" Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Does it matter? It's convincing enough for a weekend." She continued. "I'll need clothes for the entire weekend. The wedding, rehearsal dinner, brunches. My assistant will arrange shopping tomorrow." "No," Sarah interrupted. "You'll come with me." "That's not necessary." "It is. We need to appear comfortable with each other. You should know how I look in these clothes, how I move in them." James realized she was right. This charade required an intimacy of knowledge. "Fine, 10 a.m. tomorrow, basics first, then my personal stylist. And tonight?" "A guest suite downstairs has everything you need." Sarah stood. "One more thing, half the payment up front." James reached for his wallet. "I could write a check." "Cash is better. Trust doesn't factor into business transactions." He counted. Out $5,000, which he took without counting. "Good night, James." "Sarah," he called as she reached the stairs. "Why did you agree to this?" She paused. $10,000 is compelling." "Just the money?" She studied him. "Everyone has reasons for the masks they wear. Mine are my own." As she disappeared downstairs, James felt he'd invited a mystery home, one that wouldn't easily unravel. The next morning, James found Sarah reading the Wall Street Journal at his counter, hair damp from a shower. "I made coffee," she said without looking up. "Thanks." He noted how naturally she fit the scene, as if million-dollar penthouses were her norm. Their shopping expedition revealed surprises. Sarah selected elegant, understated pieces, a midnight blue evening gown, a cream silk blouse with tailored trousers, expensive casual daywear. More surprising was her knowledge. She discussed fabrics and cuts expertly, requested specific designers, and moved in heels with natural grace. At the salon, she declined most suggestions, opting for subtle changes, a trim, gentle highlights, treatments that enhanced rather than transformed. "You're not what I expected," James commented afterward. "No? Did you expect me overwhelmed, playing Cinderella?" "Something like that." Disappointment is inevitable when expectations are involved. "Dostoevsky." She looked surprised he'd remembered her book. "No, that one's mine." That evening over dinner, Sarah insisted they practice dining together. "Tell me about Emily," she said, manipulating silverware with practiced ease. James stiffened. "What about her?" "Everything. Your history together will help me play my part." He sipped wine before answering. We met at Yale, both business majors from good families. Dating was expected. Engagement followed naturally. You don't sound like you're describing the love of your life. I cared for her, he defended. But did you love her? I thought I did. The admission felt raw. She ended it 3 years ago, said I was too work-focused, that I saw her as an accessory. She met Jonathan at a charity gala I skipped. So now you want to show her what she missed? Something like that. It won't work, Sarah said softly. What won't? Using me to validate your worth? True validation never comes from external sources. I don't need psychological evaluation from someone I barely know, he snapped. Fair enough, tell me about the other guests then. James described the social circle, business associates, old money families, new tech millionaires. Sarah asked questions showing surprising social insight. Later, she brought up physical contact. People in relationships touch unconsciously. We need to establish that comfort now. She moved beside him, shoulders touching. May I? She asked, hand hovering near his. He nodded. She laced their fingers together, her touch warm and confident. Not so difficult, she said softly. But it was. Not the contact itself, but his response to it. Her proximity triggered genuine curiosity about another person. Tomorrow we'll practice intimate gestures, she continued. The small things that sell a relationship. After she left, James stared at his hand, where hers had been. Their arrangement was purely transactional, yet somehow impossibly she seemed in control. The Blackwell estate sprawled across 30 acres of prime Hampton real estate, manicured lawns sloping toward the Atlantic. James navigated the rented Aston Martin along the tree-lined driveway, acutely aware of Sarah beside him. They'd spent the week practicing their backstory and establishing couple rituals. Nervous? Sarah asked, adjusting a borrowed gold bracelet. Not nervous, just hyper-aware, she suggested. He nodded. This feels more significant than I anticipated. Sarah touched his hand, a practiced gesture that felt surprisingly natural. Everyone is so absorbed in their own narratives, they rarely scrutinize others as closely as we imagine. When did you become so wise? Observation is free education. I've had plenty of opportunity to observe. The valet opened Sarah's door. She emerged with graceful confidence, her cream silk blouse complementing navy trousers, pearl earrings completing her understated elegance. James offered his arm, which she took without hesitation, as they approached the 50 guests mingling over champagne. James Smith, Bennett Wallace, his former college roommate, approached smiling. You made it. Bennett, I'd like you to meet Sarah. Bennett's eyes widened slightly. Sarah, a pleasure. James has kept you quite a secret. He's protective. Tell the things that matter, she replied with perfectly calibrated affection, glancing at James. Something tightened in his chest at her words, the ideal mixture of intimacy and restraint. A welcome surprise, Bennett said. Let me introduce you to people who've been wondering about James's mysterious +1. As they circulated, Sarah charmed everyone. She discussed sustainable architecture with a designer, debated economic policy with a former Federal Reserve member, and engaged an author in literary conversation that left him visibly impressed. James watched with growing curiosity as each interaction revealed knowledge seemingly impossible for her circumstances. She caught his gaze occasionally, offering small smiles or touches, suggesting private understanding. She's lovely, whispered. Catherine Moore, Emily's kind aunt. Where did you find her? At a gallery opening. She told me the painting I was considering was overpriced and derivative. I asked her to dinner instead. Catherine laughed. Smart man. She seems substantial. Not like those decorative types you used to favor. The crowd shifted, revealing Emily in a simple white dress, laughing at something Jonathan had said, her hand resting on his chest, an intimacy James realized they had never shared. Their eyes met, and James felt a curious absence where pain should have been. She approached with Jonathan as Sarah slipped her fingers through his. Is that her? Sarah murmured. Yes. Deep breath. Remember why we're here. Strangely, James wasn't sure anymore. His need to prove something to Emily had faded during the week with Sarah. James, Emily greeted, air kissing his cheek. "I'm glad you could make it." "Congratulations, Emily. Jonathan, good to see you." "Likewise," Jonathan responded, with the confidence of a man with nothing to prove. Emily assessed Sarah. "I've been hearing whispers about James's new girlfriend all evening." "All good things, I hope. Your family has been incredibly welcoming." Emily's smile tightened imperceptibly. "How did you two meet? James is normally—" So work-immersed, we're all surprised by this development. "At the Richardson Gallery. I told him the Kensington piece was overvalued. He disagreed passionately." "She was right," James added, hand finding the small of her back naturally. "Saved me from an expensive mistake." "How fortunate," Emily murmured. "And what do you do, Sarah?" "I consult for foundations focused on urban renewal and educational access. Currently, I'm with the Westridge Foundation on their literacy initiative." James maintained his expression despite this unexpected detail. Emily clearly searched for something to critique. "The Westridge Foundation, I'm not familiar with them." "They're relatively new, but their community integration approach is innovative." Sarah tilted her head. "Your mother mentioned your charitable work. I'd love to hear about your initiatives over dinner." A masterful deflection, simultaneously complimentary and challenging. Emily blinked, momentarily speechless. "We should continue circulating," Jonathan interjected. "So many people to greet. We'll catch up later." As they moved away, James felt subtle tension in Sarah's posture. "You were brilliant," he murmured. "She doesn't like me. She expected someone different." "Someone less impressive," James corrected. "You've surprised everyone, including me." "The night is young," Sarah cautioned, accepting champagne from a waiter. Dinner was served in an elegant tent beneath crystal chandeliers. Throughout the meal, Sarah maintained her role perfectly, sharing enough fabricated history to seem authentic without over-elaborating, laughing appropriately, engaging with James in ways suggesting genuine affection. "You mentioned Connecticut earlier," Margot, Bennett's wife, said during dessert. "Whereabouts?" "Litchfield County, though it's been years since I've been back." "Litchfield is beautiful. Did your family have a place there?" A shadow crossed Sarah's face. "Yes, though. It was sold after my parents passed." James covered her hand with his, a gesture that began as performance but felt instinctively protective. "Sarah lost both parents within a year of each other." "I'm so sorry," Margot said genuinely. "Thank you. It was a difficult time." The conversation shifted, but James noticed Sarah's subtle withdrawal, as if her past had been touched beneath her composed exterior. After dinner, James led Sarah to the dance floor, his hand resting lightly on her waist. "You're an excellent dancer," she observed, following his lead effortlessly. "My mother insisted on lessons. No son of hers would embarrass himself socially." "A wise woman," Sarah smiled, though it didn't reach her eyes. "Are you all right? You seemed affected when Margot mentioned Connecticut." Sarah looked surprised by his perception. "Just memories." "Real ones?" She nodded slightly. "Some parts of our story are more real than others." James noticed Emily watching them, her expression unreadable. Sarah followed his gaze. "She's wondering if you're genuinely happy or putting on a show," she murmured. "And what's the answer?" Sarah studied him thoughtfully. "I think you're discovering that happiness might look different than you imagined." The comment struck him as oddly perceptive before they were interrupted by Robert Blackwell. "May I cut in? I haven't had the chance to catch up with James." Sarah gracefully stepped aside. "I'll get us drinks." Robert regarded James shrewdly. "She's quite something, not your usual type." "No, she's not. Seems to know her way around this crowd remarkably well." Sarah's background prepared her for most social situations. Robert nodded. "Emily was surprised by your RSVP, even more surprised when you arrived with someone like her." "Someone substantial, you mean?" "Precisely." Robert glanced toward Sarah, who was chatting with an elderly couple. "She reminds me of someone, though I can't place it." James felt unease flicker. "She has one of those faces." "Perhaps. It's good to see you moving forward. Emily worried about that." As the music changed, Robert excused himself. James found Sarah observing the dancing couples. Mr. Blackwell seems fond of you, she noted. We've always gotten along. He mentioned you remind him of someone. A strange expression crossed her face before she composed herself. People often say that. I must have common features. Bennett appeared beside them. You two are the talk of the evening. James Smith, workaholic extraordinaire, completely smitten. No one saw it coming. Life is full of surprises, Sarah replied, slipping her arm through James's. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it. I haven't seen him this relaxed in years. As the evening progressed, James realized Bennett was right. Despite initially seeing Emily, he felt strangely at ease. Sarah provided an unexpected anchor, her quiet confidence, subtle humor, the way she anticipated his thoughts. It was all an act, he reminded himself. Yet, as they returned to their hotel, James couldn't ignore that parts of the performance had begun feeling genuine. You were flawless tonight, he told her outside her door. Sarah studied him. You sound almost disappointed. Not disappointed, just curious. About? How much is real versus performance? Sarah's smile held a hint of sadness. In my experience, the line between those things is rarely as clear as we pretend. She pressed a gentle kiss to his cheek, a gesture they hadn't rehearsed. Good night, she said softly, disappearing behind her door, leaving James with more questions than when their charade began. The wedding day dawned perfect, sunlight sparkling on the Atlantic, visible from the ceremony site. James adjusted his bow tie, mind troubled by inconsistencies from the previous evening. Sarah's social knowledge, the Westridge Foundation mention, Robert Blackwell's sense of familiarity. A knock interrupted his thoughts. He opened to find Sarah in the midnight. Blue gown they'd selected, hair swept up elegantly, borrowed diamonds catching light as she moved. She looked regal, completely at ease in her elegance. You clean up nicely, she smiled. As do you, you look incredible. Worth your investment? She asked wryly. Something in him rebelled against the transactional reminder. That's not what I meant. Her expression softened. I know. She adjusted his already perfect bow tie, a gesture both practiced and intimate. Ready to watch your ex-fiancé marry someone else? Strangely, yes. Yesterday was harder than expected, but not how I thought it would be. How so? I realized I wasn't jealous of Jonathan. I envied what they appear to have. Something genuine. Sarah's hands stilled against his chest. Appear being the operative word. No one knows what happens behind closed doors. There was unexpected hardness in her voice before she stepped back, professional once more. We should go. Fashionably late is one thing. Missing the ceremony is another. They arrived with minutes to spare. James noticed glances in their direction, whispers behind manicured hands. Sarah remained unruffled as they took seats on the groom's side. As the ceremony began, James watched Sarah beside him. Her profile was composed, but tension tightened her jaw. The ceremony itself was brief. When the couple sealed their union, with a kiss, James felt genuine closure. You okay? Sarah murmured as they rose. Better than okay. It feels like the end of a chapter rather than a loss. The reception was held in the grand ballroom, transformed into a garden wonderland. James noticed Sarah growing increasingly quiet. Is something wrong? He asked at their table. Just pacing myself, long evening. A commotion near the entrance interrupted them. A woman in her 70s had arrived in pale blue, elegantly assisted by a distinguished gentleman. The Blackwells rushed to greet her with obvious deference. Who is that? James asked Bennett. Victoria Wilson, Emily's godmother and major Blackwell Foundation donor, rarely appears in public since her husband's scandal. James turned to find Sarah staring at the elderly woman, color drained from her face. Sarah, what is it? She composed herself visibly. Nothing. I'm not feeling well suddenly. Excuse me? She rose and headed for the exit, maintaining poise despite obvious distress. James followed, finding her in a small sitting room, standing rigidly by a window. What happened in there? He asked gently. I told you, I'm not feeling, well, it's not nothing. You looked like you'd seen a ghost when Bennett mentioned Victoria Wilson. A harsh laugh escaped her. A ghost. Yes, that's appropriate. Do you know her? After a long silence, she spoke, her voice harder, stripped of its polished tones. Victoria Wilson is my grandmother. James stared, pieces clicking into place dizzyingly fast. Your grandmother, which makes you Sarah Wilson. Daughter? They of Robert Wilson, former CEO of Wilson Construction Group, the man who supposedly embezzled millions before taking his own life 5 years ago. James knew the story, front-page news in financial circles. A respected developer accused of massive fraud. You're that Sarah Wilson, but everyone said the family disappeared after the scandal. My mother died 6 months after my father. A heart attack, though really a broken heart. Her voice was clinical, detached. I stayed, changed my appearance, tried rebuilding some semblance of life. On the streets? He asked incredulously. Her eyes flashed. Not initially. I had an apartment, a publishing house job under a different name, but legal fees drained what little wasn't seized. When the truth about who orchestrated the fraud began emerging, powerful people ensured I lost everything. What truth? Sarah hesitated before continuing. My father was set up. He discovered financial irregularities in a major joint venture and prepared to report them when suddenly he was accused. Evidence was fabricated, witnesses pressured. By the time he realized what was happening, it was too late. If that's true, why not fight it? With what resources? Against which authorities? Bitterness edged her words. They closed every avenue. My father tried gathering evidence to clear his name but died before finishing. A terrible suspicion formed. Who was behind the fraud? She met his gaze directly. The Blackwell Group was our primary venture partner. Emily's father suggested the partnership. Emily herself worked in their financial division then. The revelation hit James like a physical blow. You're saying Emily helped destroy your family? She was part of it, knowingly or as a pawn, I'm not certain. What I do know is she moved up quickly in the company afterward. Some reward for loyalty. Perhaps. James struggled to reconcile this with the Emily he thought he knew. Why didn't you tell me? Why agree to come here? Sarah laughed hollowly. Why do you think I was on that bench? I've spent years gathering information fragments. When you appeared with your proposition, a chance to enter their world again, to potentially find answers, how could I refuse? So you've been using me to get close to the Blackwells, James said, hurt evident. Isn't that ironic? You used me to make your ex jealous, and I used you to investigate my family's destruction. We're quite the pair. The door opened. Emily stood there, wedding gown gleaming. There you are, she said with artificial brightness. People were wondering where you'd disappeared to. Sarah's composure returned with remarkable speed. Emily, congratulations again on your beautiful ceremony. Emily's gaze shifted between them, noting the tension. Is everything all right? Fine, James replied automatically. Sarah needed some air. I see. Emily closed the door behind her. I actually wanted a moment alone with both of you. There's something I need to say. An odd stillness came over Sarah. And what's that? I know who you are, Sarah. Or should I say, Sarah Wilson. James felt Sarah stiffen beside him, but was impressed by her unwavering gaze. How long have you known? Sarah asked calmly. Since last night. My father thought you looked familiar, so he had someone investigate. Emily's eyes hardened. What are you playing at? Using James to get close to us? That would be poetic, wouldn't it? Perhaps I simply wanted to see the people who destroyed my family celebrating their good fortune. Emily turned to James. Did you know? Is that why you brought her? To cause a scene at my wedding? He didn't know, Sarah interjected. James is as much a pawn as you claim to be in your families. Dealings. Emily's manicured hand clenched. My family didn't destroy yours. Your father did that himself when he stole from investors. Is that what helps you sleep? Sarah asked softly. Believing the convenient story that absolved your family? It's the truth, Emily insisted, though uncertainty flickered in her eyes. No. The truth is, my father discovered irregularities in the joint accounts and scheduled a meeting with federal regulators. 3 days before that meeting, he was suddenly accused of the very crimes he meant to expose. Emily paled slightly. You can't prove that. Not yet, but I'm getting closer. Your father made a mistake bringing my grandmother today. Victoria knows things she's been too afraid to speak about until now. If you try dragging my family's name through the mud, with these accusations, we will destroy what little you have left." Sarah didn't flinch. 5 years ago that might have frightened me, but when you've already lost everything, threats lose their power. Emily turned to James, desperation edging into her bridal composure. "James, you can't believe this. You know me." Did he? James studied the woman he'd once planned to marry, seeing her clearly perhaps for the first time. The ambition he'd admired now seemed cold, the practicality calculating. "I thought I did. Now I'm not so sure." The door opened again, revealing Jonathan. "There you are," he said to Emily, then noticed the tension. "Is everything okay?" Emily composed herself visibly. "Fine, darling. Just catching up with James and his friend." Jonathan's gaze lingered on Sarah with recognition. "Miss Wilson, I thought it might be you." Sarah inclined her head. "Mr. Price." "You know her?" Emily asked, confused. "We've never met, but I followed your father's case closely. I always questioned the official narrative." He turned to Emily. "We should return to our guests." Emily hesitated, torn between continuing the confrontation and maintaining her perfect wedding facade. "Yes," she agreed finally. As they left, Emily paused at the door. "This isn't over," she said, words directed at Sarah, but eyes on James. When they were gone, Sarah released a shaky breath, composure finally cracking. James guided her to a settee where she sank down, hands trembling. "I should have told you," she said quietly. "I'm sorry. Why didn't you? Would you have believed me? Would you have agreed to bring Robert Wilson's disgraced daughter to your ex's wedding if I'd told you the truth initially?" "Probably not," he admitted, "but I might have believed you eventually." Vulnerability replaced her earlier defiance. "I never expected any of this. When you approached me, I thought it was finally a chance to get answers. I didn't expect..." "Didn't expect what?" "To like you," she said simply. "To find myself wishing this were real rather than a charade." Before James could respond, a soft knock came. Victoria Wilson entered, tears filling her eyes. "Sarah," she whispered, "it is you." Sarah stood shakily. "Grandmother." Victoria embraced her tightly. "My dear girl, we thought you were gone." "Nearly, but not quite." Victoria examined her face. "You look so much like your mother." She glanced at James. "And who is this?" "James Smith. I'm a friend of Sarah's." "He's been helping me," Sarah added, affection warming her voice. Victoria nodded, satisfied. "Good. You'll need allies for what comes next." "What does come next?" James asked. Victoria's expression hardened, reminding him this elegant woman came from the same fierce stock as Sarah. "The truth. It's time the world knew what really happened to my son." The aftermath of the wedding revelation unfolded rapidly. Victoria Wilson, freed from isolation and grief, proved a formidable ally. With her connections, doors previously closed to Sarah began opening. Financial records were examined, former employees spoke up, and investigation inconsistencies came to light. James found himself drawn deeper into Sarah's quest for justice through genuine conviction. The more he learned about Robert Wilson's downfall, the more certain he became of his innocence. 3 weeks later, Sarah sat across from James at his dining table, surrounded by documents. Her appearance had evolved, neither polished girlfriend nor street-hardened survivor, but something authentically in between. Her hair was in a simple ponytail, wearing jeans and his borrowed sweater that somehow looked better on her. "The financial audit is making progress," she said, highlighting a report section. "They've identified 3 instances where signatures were clearly forged on transfer authorizations." James nodded, scanning his tablet. "And the project timelines show accusations against your father came exactly 3 days after he requested access to offshore account ledgers. That can't be coincidence." Sarah rubbed her eyes. "It's all circumstantial. We need something definitive, linking the Blackwells directly to the fraud." "We'll find it," James assured her, surprising himself with his certainty. She looked up, a small smile playing at her lips. When did you become such a believer in lost causes? Around the time I realized you weren't what you appeared to be. He met her gaze. We never finished our conversation at the wedding. Sarah tensed slightly. Which part? The part where you said you'd found yourself wishing our arrangement was real. A flush crept up her neck. Ah, that part. Did you mean it? Does it matter? We're well past our arrangement now. That wasn't my question. Sarah set down her pen, fixing him with the direct gaze that had first caught his attention. Yes, I meant it. Somewhere between rehearsing and pretending, I discovered I wasn't pretending anymore. She shrugged with attempted nonchalance. Inconvenient, I know. Not inconvenient, unexpected but not unwelcome. Hope flickered in her eyes, quickly tempered by caution. James, my life is complicated right now. I'm essentially homeless, taking on one of New York's most powerful families, with no idea what the future holds. I'm aware of all that. And yet, he continued, taking her hand across the table, meeting you, however unorthodox, the circumstances, might be the best thing that's happened to me in years. Sarah's fingers tightened around his. You barely know me. I know enough. I know you're resilient beyond measure. Brilliant and resourceful. You can discuss Russian literature while eating pizza in sweatpants. Most importantly, when I'm with you, I'm more myself than I've ever been with anyone else. Tears gathered in her eyes, composure slipping. That's a compelling argument. I'm a businessman. Compelling arguments are my specialty. He smiled, thumb brushing her knuckles. I'm not proposing marriage or defining this. I'm simply saying I'd like to explore what could be between us, honestly this time, without pretense. After a moment's internal struggle, Sarah responded, I'd like that too, but it would have to be different. Different how? Equal, she said firmly. No employer-employee dynamic, no penthouse and street bench divide, just two people figuring things out together. Agreed, James said without hesitation. Though, I hope you'll consider the penthouse a viable living option for now. The guest suite is yours as long as you need, no strings attached. Sarah searched his face for hidden agendas, finding none. Thank you, but I'll contribute. Helping with expenses, cooking, whatever's needed. I won't be a charity case. I wouldn't dare suggest it, James replied, knowing her pride was essential to her identity. Partners, then? Partners, she agreed, a genuine smile emerging. In all senses of the word. The shift in their relationship was both subtle and profound. Sarah's walls began coming down. She spoke more openly about her past, her Connecticut childhood, Vassar education, close relationship with her father, and the devastating loss of both parents in quick succession. After Mom died, I tried keeping going, she explained one evening, on his balcony as city lights emerged in the dusk. I had a publishing job, a small apartment, but then I started questioning what happened to Dad, and things unraveled quickly. Lost my job under suspicious circumstances, then my apartment. Friends disappeared, like being erased. How did you survive? James asked softly. One day at a time. She hugged her knees to her chest, suddenly looking younger. Libraries became my sanctuaries, warm, free, full of information. I picked up odd jobs, slept in shelters when necessary, kept researching. A rueful smile touched her lips. I'd gotten quite good at invisible living until you came along. James took her hand. I'm glad I did. So am I, though I'm still not entirely sure why you did. Of all the women in New York, why approach the one on a bench with a backpack? James considered the question that had lingered between them. Something in your posture, he answered finally. The way you held yourself in difficult circumstances. A dignity, a self-possession I recognized. He smiled. Plus, you were reading Dostoevsky, hardly typical bench literature. Crime and punishment seemed appropriate given my circumstances, Sarah observed dryly. Your father wasn't Raskolnikov. He didn't commit any crime. No, she agreed, but I sometimes think I've been punishing myself anyway, living in penance for something neither of us did. James brushed a strand of hair from her face, a once rehearsed gesture now natural. Maybe it's time to stop. Their first real kiss happened that evening, tentative at first, then deepening with surprising intensity. When they separated, Sarah looked slightly dazed. "That was not according to script," she murmured. "Better," James suggested. "Much better," she agreed, drawing him back. As weeks became months, Sarah's case gained momentum. Victoria's testimony proved crucial, revealing conversations and documents preserved after her son's death. Former employees came forward, protected by James's resources. The Blackwells responded with predictable aggression. Legal threats, attempts to discredit Sarah, economic pressure against her supporters. But they underestimated truth, paired with determination. The breakthrough came on a rainy Tuesday, delivered by Bennett Wallace, who had been quietly investigating since the wedding. "You need to see this," he said, entering James's office with a sealed envelope. From the Blackwell Group's backup server archives, an IT friend salvaged it before deletion. Inside were emails between Robert Blackwell and his financial team, explicitly discussing the creation of falsified evidence against Robert Wilson. Emily's name appeared in several exchanges, confirming her knowledge of the scheme. Sarah went completely still, seeing the evidence, 5 years of struggle culminating in vindication. "We have them," she whispered. James placed his hand on her shoulder. "What do you want to do?" Conflict was evident in her expression. Justice should be the answer. Legal proceedings, public exposure. But I've learned justice and the legal system aren't always aligned. The Blackwells still have tremendous influence. "We could take this to federal authorities," Bennett suggested. "With these documents, they'd have to investigate." "Or," James offered quietly, "we could approach the Blackwells directly. Offer terms." Sarah's eyes widened. "Terms? A negotiated resolution, public acknowledgement of your father's innocence, financial restitution, clearing your family name without years of legal battles." He held her gaze. "Your decision, Sarah. Whatever you choose, I'll support." After weighing options and calculating costs, she decided, "I want my father's name cleared and the world to know he was innocent. But I don't want to spend the next decade fighting in courtrooms. We'll approach them with terms, with the understanding that if they refuse, we go public with everything." The meeting occurred in Bennett's law office. Robert Blackwell arrived with attorneys, but without Emily, who had reportedly left for Europe after the evidence emerged. His imperious demeanor had diminished, replaced by a cautious recognition of vulnerability. Sarah presented their terms with remarkable composure: a public statement acknowledging Robert Wilson's innocence, financial restitution to re-establish the Wilson Foundation, and a private letter of apology to Victoria. "And if I refuse?" Blackwell asked, though without conviction. "Then by tomorrow these documents will be with federal prosecutors, the financial press, and every major news outlet on the East Coast," Sarah replied evenly. "Your choice." He chose self-preservation over pride. The statement was released the following week. The financial settlement, while less than the true cost of what had been lost, was substantial enough to rebuild. Most importantly, Robert Wilson's name was cleared. Afterward, Sarah stood in James's penthouse, their penthouse, now staring out at the city that had both broken and rebuilt her. "How does it feel?" James asked, joining her. "Incomplete. Satisfying in some ways, insufficient in others. Dad is still gone. Mom is still gone. No statement or settlement changes that." James nodded understanding. "What will you do with the foundation?" She smiled. "Focus on organizations helping people rebuild after financial catastrophe, housing assistance, legal aid, educational opportunities, the things I needed most when everything fell apart." "Perfect," James said admiringly. Sarah turned to face him. "I've been thinking about what comes next, for us." Uncertainty fluttered through him. "And?" "I'm not going back to who I was before. I can't be that person anymore. I wouldn't want you to. I never knew that, Sarah, but I'm certain I prefer the one standing before me." Her expression softened. "The foundation will take time to establish. I'll need office space, staff, a proper home base. Smith Industries has plenty of office space available." And as for a home base, he hesitated before continuing carefully, I was hoping you might consider making your stay here more permanent. Sarah's eyebrow arched skeptically. Are you asking me to move in with you, James Smith? I'm suggesting what began as a guest suite arrangement could evolve into something more intentional, he clarified, his business precision making her smile, if that interests you. It might, she replied, stepping closer, though I have conditions. Of course you do. Equal partnership. I pay my way, and before you protest, the settlement makes that possible now. I maintain independence while we build whatever this is between us, and we take it slowly. Real relationships aren't built in weekend charades. James recognized the wisdom in her terms. Counter-proposal, all of the above plus one addition. Which is honesty, complete honesty, even when difficult. No more secrets, no more masks. Sarah's eyes softened, vulnerability and strength perfectly balanced. Those terms are acceptable, Mr. Smith. Excellent, Ms. Wilson. I believe we have a deal. As she sealed their agreement with a kiss, James reflected on their strange path. What began as a desperate charade had transformed into something neither anticipated. A chance to rebuild, to discover authenticity in unexpected places, to find home in another person rather than in walls and possessions. What are you thinking? Sarah asked, searching his expression. That sometimes the wrong reasons can lead to the right outcomes, he answered honestly. She smiled, a real smile, unguarded and true. Then I suppose we should be grateful for Emily's wedding invitation after all. I'll send her a thank you note, James replied with mock seriousness. Sarah laughed, the sound filling the space between them with warmth and promise. Let's not get carried away. Spring arrived in New York, with characteristic unpredictability. Brilliantly. Sunny one day, rain-soaked the next. 6 months had passed since the resolution with the Blackwells, each day bringing new developments in Sarah and James's evolving relationship. The Wilson Foundation had taken shape under Sarah's careful guidance, establishing itself in modest offices within the Smith Industries building. Its mission, to provide support for victims of financial fraud and collapse, had already attracted attention from both donors and those in need. Sarah approached her work with the same determination that had sustained her through her years of hardship, though now that energy was channeled toward building rather than merely surviving. James watched her transformation with a sense of wonder. The woman who had once been careful to reveal nothing now spoke passionately at foundation events, sharing elements of her own story to connect with others who had experienced similar losses. She had developed a network of legal advisors, financial, counselors, and mental health professionals who volunteered their services to people rebuilding their lives after financial catastrophe. Their personal relationship had deepened gradually, honoring Sarah's request for a measured pace. She had officially moved into the penthouse 3 months prior, though she maintained a small studio apartment elsewhere. Just in case, she'd explained, and James understood her need for security, for options, after having had none for so long. On this particular Saturday morning, James woke to find Sarah's side of the bed empty. He found her on the balcony, wrapped in a blanket against the early spring chill, a cup of coffee cradled in her hands as she watched the sunrise. Early riser, he commented, joining her with his own coffee. Old habits, she replied with a small smile. When you've spent time without safe shelter, you learn to appreciate dawn from a protected vantage point. James nodded. Understanding this was one of many perspectives he would never fully share, but could learn to honor. Any particular reason for the contemplation this morning? Sarah was quiet for a moment, gathering her thoughts. I received an email from Emily yesterday. The statement caught him by surprise. Emily, what did she want? To apologize, apparently. Sarah's tone was neutral, but her fingers tightened around her mug. She claims she didn't know the full extent of her father's actions, though she admits she suspected something wasn't right. She says she's been doing a lot of soul-searching in Europe. Do you believe her? I don't know, Sarah admitted. Does it matter? The damage was done, regardless of her level of knowledge or intent. James considered this. Maybe. The question isn't whether you believe her, but whether her apology has any value to you. Sarah turned to look at him, a wry smile tugging at her lips. When did you become so philosophical? I've had a good influence recently, he replied, nudging her shoulder gently with his. Someone who makes me consider the deeper questions. Her expression softened. To answer your question, yes, there is some value in it. Not because I necessarily forgive her, but because it's one more acknowledgement that my father was wronged. Each person who admits that truth helps restore his legacy a little more. Will you respond? Eventually, I'm still deciding what to say. She set her coffee down on the small table between their chairs. It's strange. A year ago, I would have been consumed by anger at the mere mention of her name. Now, I find I can think about the Blackwells without that burning rage. It's still there, but muted. Healing happens gradually, James observed. Often so slowly we don't notice until we look back. Sarah reached for his hand, interlacing their fingers. When I first agreed to your proposal on that bench, I never imagined we'd end up here. Disappointed? He asked, only half joking. Quite the opposite. Her thumb traced patterns on his palm. I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, for something to go wrong. That's been the pattern of my life for so long. Not anymore, James said with quiet certainty. How can you be so sure? Because neither of us is the same person who made that initial arrangement. We've built something, real, Sarah. Something based on truth rather than convenience or pretense. She smiled, the morning light catching in her eyes. That's a rather romantic notion for a businessman. I contain multitudes, he replied, making her laugh. Later that day, they visited Victoria Wilson at her Connecticut estate, a monthly ritual that had become important to both Sarah and her grandmother. The grand house, once the center of Wilson family gatherings, had stood nearly empty during Sarah's years on the streets. Now it was coming back to life, room by room. Victoria greeted them in the conservatory, where spring flowers bloomed in defiance of the still cool temperatures outside. At 77, she retained the elegant bearing that had once intimidated New York society, though genuine warmth now softened her features when she embraced her granddaughter. Sarah, darling, and James, welcome, both of you. She gestured to the table where tea had been laid out. Perfect timing. Mrs. Abernathy just brought in fresh scones. As they settled into what had become their usual places, James observed the easy interaction between the two Wilson women. Their reconciliation had been among the most meaningful outcomes of the past months. Victoria had apologized repeatedly for not searching harder for Sarah after everything fell apart, an oversight born of her own grief and the manipulations of those who wanted the Wilson family silenced. The foundation is expanding its services, Sarah was explaining as she added milk to her grandmother's tea without being asked. We've partnered with a legal aid society that specializes in financial fraud cases. Victoria nodded approvingly. Your father would be so proud, dear. Taking something painful and transforming it into help for others, that's the Wilson way. We're also looking at educational initiatives, James added, helping people understand complex financial arrangements before they sign them. An excellent addition, Victoria replied. Prevention is always preferable to remedy. As they continued discussing foundation business, James found himself struck by how naturally he had been incorporated into these family conversations. Victoria treated him not as an outsider or merely Sarah's partner, but as an integral part of their rebuilding efforts. After tea, Sarah excused herself to review some family documents Victoria had found in the attic, leaving James and the elder Wilson alone in the conservatory. She's flourishing, Victoria observed, watching her granddaughter disappear down the hallway. I worried I might never see that again. Sarah is remarkably resilient, James agreed. Yes, but resilience alone isn't enough for flourishing. One needs the right conditions. Victoria's shrewd eyes assessed him. You've provided those conditions, James. He shook his head slightly. Sarah would have found her way eventually, with or without me. I just happened to be there at a pivotal moment. Perhaps, but don't underestimate the importance of being there at the right time with the right response. Victoria adjusted her elegant shawl. When Robert, my son, first met Sarah's mother, he said something I've never forgotten. He said, "She makes me more myself than I've ever been." I see that same quality in your relationship with Sarah. The echo of his own words to Sarah months ago wasn't lost on James. "It goes both ways," he said simply. Victoria smiled knowingly. "The best relationships always do." She paused, then added more carefully, "Have you discussed marriage?" The question caught him off guard. "Not explicitly, no. Sarah values her independence, especially after having lost it so completely. I wouldn't want to pressure her. Understanding her need for autonomy is precisely why you're good for her," Victoria noted. "But don't assume independence and partnership are mutually exclusive. Sarah has never feared commitment, only the loss of self that sometimes accompanies it." Before James could respond, Sarah returned, carrying a leather-bound photo album. "Look what Grandma found," she said, setting it on the table between them. Dad's engineering projects from the beginning of his career. The rest of the afternoon was spent in pleasant reminiscence, with Victoria sharing stories of Robert Wilson's early achievements and Sarah adding childhood memories of visiting construction sites with her father. James listened, absorbing these glimpses into the family history that had shaped the woman beside him. On the drive back to the city, Sarah was quieter than usual, seemingly lost in thought as she watched the Connecticut landscape give way to the more urban surroundings of New York's outskirts. "Everything okay?" James asked eventually. "Yes," she replied, then amended. "Mostly. Being at the estate always stirs up memories. Good ones, but sometimes they catch me by surprise." "Want to talk about it?" She turned to look at him, appreciation evident in her expression. "Actually, I was thinking about what home means, and for years after I lost everything, I thought of home exclusively as a physical place, the house in Connecticut, then the apartment I lost, then any shelter I could find." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "But being with you has reminded me that home isn't always a location. Sometimes it's a feeling, a sense of safety and belonging that can exist anywhere if you're with the right person." James reached across the console to take her hand, deeply moved by her words. "I feel the same way." "I know you do," she said softly. "That's why I wanted to tell you that I'm giving up my studio apartment. I've been holding onto it as a safety net, but I don't need it anymore. The penthouse, with you, that's home now." The simple statement held profound significance, representing a level of trust Sarah hadn't been able to offer before. "Are you sure?" "Completely," she confirmed. "It's time to stop hedging my bets, to fully commit to this life we're building." When they returned to the penthouse that evening, there was a subtle shift in the atmosphere, a sense of permanence, of shared purpose that transcended their physical surroundings. As they moved through their evening routine, James found himself observing small details. Sarah's books now fully integrated with his on the shelves, her preferred brand of tea beside his coffee in the kitchen, the painting she'd selected hanging in the entryway. These weren't just signs of cohabitation, but of belonging, the gradual organic merging of two lives into a shared existence. Later, as they prepared for bed, Sarah emerged from the bathroom wearing an expression James had come to recognize as her decision face. "I've been thinking," she began, sitting on the edge of the bed. "A dangerous pastime," he teased gently. She smiled, acknowledging the joke, but her eyes remained serious. "When we first met, or rather when you first approached me, you were looking for a date to a wedding, someone to help you save face." "Not my proudest moment," James admitted, sitting beside her. "Maybe not, but it led us here." She took his hand. "And now I'm wondering if you'd be interested in attending another wedding." James raised an eyebrow. "Whose?" "Ours," she said simply. "If you're interested." For perhaps the first time in their relationship, James found himself completely speechless. Sarah watched him, amusement gradually replacing the vulnerability in her expression. "I believe this is where you say something," she prompted. "You're proposing," he managed finally. "I am. Unconventional, I know, but then again, nothing about us has followed the traditional script." Her fingers tightened around his. "Is that a problem?" No, James said quickly, finding his voice. Not at all. I'm just surprised. Happily surprised. But not answering the question, Sarah noted, a hint of nervousness creeping into her tone. James shifted to face her fully, taking both her hands in his. Sarah Wilson, nothing would make me happier than marrying you. Yes, absolutely, unequivocally yes. The smile that bloomed across her face was luminous. Good answer. But May, I ask what prompted this. Not that I'm complaining, but it seems sudden. Sarah's expression grew thoughtful. Today at the estate, seeing those photos of my father, hearing Grandma's stories, it reminded me that life is unpredictable. The Wilsons had everything, then nothing, and now we're rebuilding. Through all of that, the only thing that really mattered was who we had beside us. She met his gaze directly. I don't want to waste any more time being cautious about the best thing in my life. James drew her close, overwhelmed by the journey that had brought them to this moment, from a transactional arrangement between strangers to a partnership founded on mutual respect, shared purpose, and deep love. I love you, he said simply, the words inadequate to express the fullness of his feeling, but necessary nonetheless. I love you too, she replied, her voice steady and sure. Enough to build a true home with you, whatever that looks like. As they held each other in the quiet of their bedroom, James reflected on the strange serendipity of their meeting. He had approached a seemingly homeless woman on a bench, seeking someone to play a part in his carefully constructed image. Instead, he had found a partner who challenged him to discard pretense entirely, to build something authentic in its place. Their true home, he realized, wasn't the penthouse or even the life they were creating together. It was the space between them, the trust, the honesty, the mutual recognition of each other's genuine selves. A home not built of walls and possessions, but of choices made daily to see and be seen, to accept and be accepted, to love and be loved without condition or performance. What are you thinking? Sarah asked, noting his contemplative expression. That sometimes we find exactly what we need, even when we're looking for something else entirely. She nodded, understanding as she always did. The best kind of unexpected encounter. The wedding was planned for early autumn, a small, intimate ceremony at Victoria Wilson's Connecticut estate. Unlike the elaborate production of Emily and Jonathan's nuptials, Sarah and James envisioned something simpler. Close friends, family, and colleagues gathered to witness their commitment without extravagance or spectacle. No ice sculptures, no string quartet, no designer cake the size of a small car, Sarah had specified, making James laugh. Whatever you want, he'd assured her, content to let her shape the day according to her vision. As the date approached, the Wilson Foundation continued to thrive under Sarah's direction. What had begun as a small operation, focused on financial fraud victims, had expanded to include educational programs, legal advocacy, and housing assistance. Sarah had assembled a talented team who shared her passion for helping those whose lives had been derailed by circumstances beyond their control. James, meanwhile, had initiated significant changes at Smith Industries. The company's historic focus on technological development had broadened to include social impact investments and community-based initiatives. Some board members had initially resisted this evolution, viewing it as a distraction from profit margins, but James had persisted, convinced that business success and social responsibility could coexist. 3 weeks before the wedding, Sarah returned to the penthouse after a foundation event, fatigue evident in the slope of her shoulders, but satisfaction in her eyes. Successful evening? James asked, looking up from his laptop. Very, she confirmed, slipping off her heels with a sigh of relief. We secured funding for the Veterans Housing Program, and 3 more law firms have committed pro bono hours for our legal clinic. Congratulations, James said warmly. That's the last major piece of the Phase 1 plan, isn't it? Sarah nodded, joining him on the sofa. The foundation is officially established on solid ground. Now we can start thinking about expansion. She leaned against him, her body relaxing. How was your day? Productive but challenging. The board is still divided on the Community Investment Initiative. He set his laptop aside, giving her his full attention. Nothing that won't resolve itself eventually. Sarah studied him, noting the tension around his eyes. You're worried about it. Not worried exactly, just aware of the stakes. This represents a significant shift in company direction. One you believe in, she observed. Completely, he confirmed. But convincing others requires patience, especially when it involves change. Sarah nodded, understanding the delicate balance of leadership. They'll come around. The financial projections support your vision, and the pilot programs have shown promising results. Sometimes people just need time to adjust their perspectives. James smiled, appreciating her insight. When did you become so wise about corporate politics? I had a good teacher, she replied, returning his smile. A certain CEO who knows how to navigate complicated situations. High praise from the woman who outmaneuvered the Blackwell family. Sarah's expression clouded slightly at the mention of the name. Speaking of the Blackwells, I received a wedding gift from Emily today. You're kidding, James said, surprised. What was it? A first-edition collection of Russian literature, Dostoevsky, Tolstoy, Chekhov. Beautiful binding, clearly expensive. Sarah's tone was carefully neutral. The card said, "From one survivor to another, best wishes for your future." James watched her process this unexpected gesture. How do you feel about it? Conflicted, she admitted. Part of me appreciates the gesture, especially the thoughtfulness of the gift itself. She remembered my reading preferences from that first encounter. Sarah paused. Another part wonders if this is some kind of power play, a reminder that she's still out there, still connected to our lives in some way. Do you want to return it? Sarah considered the question seriously. No, she decided finally. I'll accept it as what it appears to be, a peace offering. Holding on to resentment serves no purpose at this point. James nodded, admiring her capacity for growth. What did your grandmother say about it? That Emily is trying to assuage her guilt, but that accepting the gift doesn't require forgetting what happened. Sarah smiled slightly. Grandma has become quite philosophical in her later years. Wisdom often comes with age, James observed. And experience, Sarah added, her expression growing thoughtful. Sometimes I think about how differently everything might have turned out if my father hadn't died, if the truth had emerged sooner, if I hadn't lost everything. Regrets? James asked gently. Not exactly, more like awareness of life's strange geometry. If any single element had been different, if you hadn't approached me that day, if I hadn't been reading on that particular bench, we wouldn't be here now. She gestured to encompass the life they had built together. As painful as those years were, they led to this. James pulled her closer, understanding the complex emotions behind her words. The foundation wouldn't exist without your experience. All those people you're helping now might still be struggling alone. True, she acknowledged, though sometimes I wonder if that justifies the suffering. It doesn't, James said firmly. Nothing justifies what happened to your family, but finding meaning afterward, creating something positive from it, that's not justification, it's transformation. You've taken control of a narrative that others tried to write for you. Sarah leaned her head against his shoulder, absorbing his words. True control, she murmured. Not in preventing painful experiences, but in choosing how to respond to them. Exactly, James agreed, pressing a kiss to her temple. The wedding day dawned clear and perfect, autumn painting the Connecticut landscape in rich golds and reds. The ceremony would take place on the lawn of the Wilson estate, with a reception to follow in the restored ballroom that had once hosted the family's legendary gatherings. Sarah prepared in her childhood bedroom, preserved much as it had been, when she left for college years ago. Victoria had arranged for a professional stylist and makeup artist, but Sarah had opted for simplicity. Her hair in loose waves, her makeup minimal, her dress an elegant sheath of ivory silk that spoke of timeless elegance rather than bridal extravagance. As Victoria fastened a string of pearls around her granddaughter's neck, the same pearls Sarah's mother had worn on her wedding day, tears gathered in the older woman's eyes. "You look beautiful, my dear," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Your parents would be so proud of the woman you've become." Sarah touched the pearls gently. I wish they could be here." "They are, in their way," Victoria assured her. "In your strength, your determination, your capacity for rebuilding rather than surrendering." She cupped Sarah's cheek tenderly. "And in the way you love James, wholly and honestly. That's pure Robert and Elizabeth Wilson." A knock at the door interrupted the moment. Bennett Wallace's wife, Margot, peeked in. "Sorry to interrupt," she said, "but there's a situation downstairs that needs Sarah's attention." Sarah frowned. "What kind of situation?" "It seems James has had some sort of panic attack. He's locked himself in the library and is refusing to speak to anyone." Alarm shot through Sarah. "That doesn't sound like James at all." "That's what Bennett said," Margot confirmed. "He thought you might be able to help." Victoria looked concerned. "Is it wedding nerves, do you think?" "James doesn't get nervous," Sarah said, already moving toward the door. "Something else must be wrong." She made her way swiftly through the house, conscious of the curious glances from early arriving guests. The library door was indeed closed, with Bennett standing guard outside. "What happened?" Sarah demanded. Bennett looked relieved to see her. "I don't know exactly. We were talking about the ceremony, having a final glass of scotch. He seemed fine. Then he got a text message, looked at it, and completely shut down. Said he needed a minute alone, came in here, and locked the door." "Has he said anything?" "Since? Not a word. I've tried talking to him, but—" Bennett shrugged helplessly. Sarah nodded, processing the information. "Give us some privacy, please." Once Bennett had moved a discreet distance away, Sarah knocked gently on the door. "James, it's me. Can we talk?" Silence greeted her request. "James, whatever it is, we can figure it out together. Please let me in." After a long moment, she heard the lock turn. The door opened just enough for her to slip inside, then closed again immediately. James stood by the window, his back to her, still in his trousers and dress shirt but without his jacket or tie. The set of his shoulders spoke of tension, his hands gripping the windowsill with uncharacteristic intensity. "James," Sarah said softly, approaching slowly. "What's happening?" He didn't turn. "You should be getting ready." "I am ready," she replied. "But something's clearly wrong, and I'm not proceeding with anything until we address it. Talk to me." He released a heavy breath, then wordlessly handed her his phone, open to a text message. Sarah took it, her stomach tightening as she read, "Congratulations on your upcoming nuptials. Before you proceed, you should know that your bride may not be who she claims. The attached documents suggest Sarah Wilson has been manipulating you from the beginning. Her chance meeting with you was carefully orchestrated. Nothing about your relationship has been genuine. A concerned friend." Attached were several files, surveillance photos of Sarah near James's office in the days before their meeting, email excerpts suggesting she had researched him extensively, and a draft plan outlining how she would use him to gain access to the Blackwell circle. Sarah stared at the screen, momentarily speechless. When she looked up, James was finally facing her, his expression a complex mixture of hurt, confusion, and hope. "Is it true?" he asked quietly. Sarah set the phone down carefully, her mind racing. Parts of it, she admitted, knowing that anything less than complete honesty would destroy them. But not in the way it's being presented. James waited silently for her to continue. "After I discovered the Blackwell's involvement in my father's downfall, I started looking for ways to gain access to their circle," Sarah explained, her voice steady despite her thundering heart. "I researched everyone connected to them, including you as Emily's former fiancé. I thought perhaps someday I might find a way to approach you, use that connection somehow." She moved to the window, needing him to see her face clearly for what came next. "But I never implemented any plan. The surveillance photos, yes, I did go to your office building once, trying to gather courage to approach you. But I couldn't do it. It felt manipulative, dishonest. So I abandoned the idea entirely." "And our meeting on the bench?" James asked, his voice carefully neutral. "Completely coincidental," Sarah affirmed. "I was genuinely surprised when you approached me. When you made your proposal, I recognized the opportunity for what it was. Unexpected access to the very people I'd been trying to reach. But I never orchestrated our meeting, James. Never. The research, though, You knew who I was, details about my life. Yes, she acknowledged. I recognized you from my earlier research, and when you introduced yourself, I saw a chance I hadn't been brave enough to create for myself. She met his gaze directly. I should have told you this from the beginning. When we agreed to complete honesty, I should have mentioned this piece of my past, but I was afraid you would misinterpret it exactly as this message suggests, afraid you would doubt everything between us. James was silent for a long moment, absorbing her words. Who sent this? He finally asked. The Blackwells would be my guess, Sarah replied, or someone acting on their behalf. The timing is hardly coincidental. Does it matter if they're right? James countered. If you researched me, considered using me as a means to an end, it matters entirely, Sarah interrupted, moving closer to him. Because intent and outcome are different things. Yes, I researched you. Yes, I considered approaching you with ulterior motives. But I didn't. Our actual meeting was genuine, unexpected. And everything that developed between us afterward, that was real, James, completely real. She took his hand, relief flooding through her when he didn't pull away. I fell in love with you despite my original intentions, not because of them. The man I came to know was nothing like the subject of my research. He was deeper, more compassionate, more complex. I couldn't have planned for that, couldn't have faked my response to it. James studied her, searching for truth in her expression. Why didn't you tell me this when we first discovered the Blackwell connection, or when we agreed to complete honesty afterward? Fear, Sarah admitted simply. Fear that you would see the initial research as proof that everything between us was calculated. Fear of losing the most genuine connection I've ever had. She tightened her grip on his hand. It was wrong not to tell you. That's my failure, and I own it completely. But it doesn't change the truth of us, James, not unless we let it. The silence that followed seemed eternal, the future of their relationship suspended in the balance. Finally, James spoke. I believe you, he said quietly. Relief weakened Sarah's knees. You do? Yes. A hint of his usual certainty returned to his voice. Because what you're describing, the difference between what you initially thought and what actually developed, that's exactly what happened with me too. I approached you for entirely self-serving reasons. I was using you as a prop in my own narrative. But what grew between us was something I never anticipated, never planned for. He drew her closer, his free hand coming up to cradle her cheek. We both began with hidden agendas, Sarah. We both discovered something unexpected and real in the process. That symmetry actually makes perfect sense to me. A tremulous smile touched Sarah's lips. So we're okay? We're okay, James confirmed, though I think we need to address who sent this and why before they try something else. Sarah nodded, her mind already working through possibilities. The sender expected this to derail our wedding, drive a wedge between us that couldn't be overcome. The timing suggests someone who knew exactly when to cause maximum damage. Someone with access to your past movements and communications, James added. That narrows the field considerably. And someone with a vested interest in preventing our marriage. Sarah reached for his phone again, examining the message more carefully. The phrase concerned friend is interesting. Not enemy, not stranger, friend. Understanding dawned in James's eyes. Emily. Most likely, Sarah agreed, though she'd be careful to maintain deniability. James shook his head, anger replacing his earlier confusion. We should postpone, investigate this properly. No, Sarah interrupted firmly. That's exactly what she wants, to disrupt today, to insert herself into our lives, to maintain some measure of control over our narrative. But if she has more information, more ways to twist the truth, then we'll face it together when and if it comes, Sarah said with quiet determination. I refuse to give her the satisfaction of affecting our wedding day. Besides, she added with a small smile, there's nothing else she could reveal that would matter. We've both acknowledged our imperfect beginnings. The rest is just details. James studied her, admiration evident in his expression. You're remarkable, you know that. I'm pragmatic, Sarah corrected, and determined not to let fear of what others might do dictate how we live our lives. She straightened his collar gently. That's what true control looks like, James. Not in preventing every possible attack, but in choosing how we respond when they come. He nodded slowly, his resolve visibly strengthening. You're right. Of course you're right. A genuine smile finally emerged. So, Miss Wilson, shall we proceed with getting married? Absolutely, Mr. Smith, she replied, relief and joy mingling in her voice. Provided you still want to. His answer was to draw her into a kiss that conveyed everything words could not. Trust restored. Commitment deepened, love affirmed in the face of challenge. The ceremony proceeded an hour later than originally scheduled. The delay explained away as a timing issue with the floral deliveries. If guests noticed anything amiss, the radiant expressions of the bride and groom as they exchanged vows quickly dispelled any concerns. Under a canopy of autumn leaves, Sarah and James promised to build a life together, founded on honesty, respect, and mutual support. They acknowledged the unconventional path that had brought them together and embraced the unpredictability of what lay ahead. From charade to truth, from performance to authenticity, James said in his vows, his voice steady and sure. You have taught me that real connection begins where pretense ends. I promise to honor that lesson in all our days together. In the darkest moments of my life, I never imagined finding home again, Sarah responded, emotion making her voice waver slightly. You helped me rebuild not just my circumstances, but my capacity for trust, for hope, for love. I promise to nurture what we've created, to face whatever comes with courage and honesty, to choose us every day. As they sealed their commitment with a kiss, applause erupted from the gathered witnesses. Victoria Wilson dabbed at tears. Bennett, Wallace grinned broadly, and staff from the Wilson Foundation cheered for the couple who had created new possibilities from the ashes of loss. During the reception, as James and Sarah shared their first dance, he pulled her close and murmured, "Any regrets about how we handled the message, I mean?" Sarah shook her head slightly. "None. We faced it together, with honesty. That's all. That matters. I sent a response, you know," he admitted, "while you were finishing getting ready." "Oh? What did you say?" A smile tugged at his lips. "Thank you for your concern, but I'm fully aware of my wife's remarkable journey. Perhaps someday you'll find someone who appreciates your complexity as much as I appreciate hers." Sarah laughed, the sound bright with genuine joy. "Perfect. Absolutely perfect." As they moved across the dance floor, surrounded by people who had supported their journey, Sarah reflected on the strange, winding path that had led to this moment. From a bench in the financial district to this restored family estate, from desperation to triumph, from performance to authenticity, each step had been necessary, each challenge ultimately strengthening rather than diminishing what they had built together. The message that morning had been intended to destroy, to cast doubt on everything they believed about their relationship. Instead, it had affirmed the very foundation on which they stood, the commitment to face truth together, to acknowledge imperfection without allowing it to define their future. True control, Sarah realized, wasn't about preventing pain or challenges. It wasn't about maintaining perfect narratives or unblemished appearances. It was about choosing response over reaction, growth over stagnation, truth over comfortable illusion. It was about recognizing that the most powerful story wasn't the one others tried to write for you, but the one you authored yourself, day by day, choice by choice, alongside those who saw your authentic self and loved you anyway. "What are you thinking?" James asked, noticing her thoughtful expression. Sarah smiled up at him, all masks and pretenses long since discarded between them. That sometimes the most unexpected arrangements lead to the truest outcomes. "And that," James replied, drawing her closer, "is certainly worth celebrating." As the music continued and the evening unfolded around them, Sarah and James remained at its center. Two people who had begun as strangers playing roles and emerged as partners in the truest sense, their imperfect beginning transformed into something authentic, enduring, and real.